Hello there, this is a message for Dan Marshall and Dorset Police to let you know that there is a very clear and definite connection between the savage brick murder attempt committed by Dan Marshall in 2003 and the tragic accident that happened to my son a short while later. Simply to say that the efforts to try and cover up this savage brick murder attempt using badly falsified police statements, perjury, blatant perjury, and extreme terrorism made a highly significant contribution to my son's accident and the fracture of his femur that happened a short while after the court case. And if you add to that the serious mutilations that I've also suffered in the meantime, and I'm referring to the facial distortion and the loss of over half of my teeth, like so, I think you'll find that this is also definite clear evidence of extreme terrorism that was put into effect. This is in 2003 at the time of the savage brick murder attempt and efforts to try and cover it up. Or in other words, to say that basically my son's accident and his fractured femur and the horror that happened that day and the mutilations you see to my mouth, teeth and face would not have happened. None of it would have been half as serious, I believe, if there had not been a campaign of extreme terrorism at the time instigated in 2003 in order to try and cover up this brick murder attempt and all kinds of other acts of intimidation against me that were happening at the time. Now, as I say, this therefore is now translating into proof. The very fact that my son did have such a horrific accident, the fact that I have been left badly mutilated, facially and dentally, is proof positive of the fact that there was a brick murder attempt. There was pathetic efforts made to try and cover it up using blatant perjury in Bournemouth Crown Court, atrocious deceit that was fed to a judge in order to try and prosecute me for somebody else's crimes. Somebody who was twice my size, never suffered from cancer, never struggled with a head injury, and is clearly far too cowardly to face up to anything that they've done themselves or admit the truth, and therefore decided it would be a good idea to try and pass the buck to me and see if I could be prosecuted for his crimes, merely for the fact he's just too spineless to admit that what he'd done and was basically embarrassed. And I think that the fact that he did realise it was extremely cowardly to try and kill me with a brick merely because I'd gone to visit my son and I'd asked to see my son for a few minutes, which was completely and wholly unjustified. That, as I say, he was twice my size at the time, never battled cancer, never struggled with a head injury. So why would he need a brick to try and murder me if I've only just gone to see my son for 2 minutes? It really is the most appalling and disgusting act of violence against somebody and bullying against somebody who was basically half his own size, as I say, and half as healthy. And for that reason, or by simple definition, that makes this chap Dan Marshall just a massive, absolutely massive, lying, murdering coward and an extremely dishonest, spineless psychopath, spineless, violent psychopath who will stop at nothing in order to cover up the very embarrassing, cowardly acts of violence that he commits. For example, trying to kill people half his own size with head injuries using a brick. For no justified reason whatsoever, just merely because I'd gone to see my son for a few minutes or just requested to spend a couple of minutes time with him, which is nothing short of absolutely disgusting, not just utterly spineless and cowardly. I mean, let's be honest here. I think it's about time that we did open our minds to the truth here about what actually happened and listen to the truth and the reality of what did happen that day. So, I mean, the fact that this chap, as I say, was happy to attack anyone half his size struggling with cancer, happy to commit perjury in order to cover it all up, with badly falsified police statements and trot out the most appalling lies to a judge, which resulted very quickly in GBH calls to my son, and later on horrific mutilations, or serious mutilations to my mouth, teeth and face, I think only proves the fact that this chap is far too scared to face truth and justice. It makes him a spineless bully, just a spineless, lying, murdering bully, who I believe needs to be brought to justice. I think it's about time that somebody asked this guy what's going on. And for that reason, I think it's about time you, Dan Marshall, Mr. Spineless, lying, murdering coward, speak to the police, go to a police station and admit what you did. I mean, what's wrong with telling the truth? What's wrong with telling them that the truth about what happened that day, that you picked up a brick, you made repeated lunges at my head to try and split my skull open, and then try to cover it up with all this appalling deceit and atrocious nonsense, which has, as I say, resulted in horrific accidents to my son, which was nothing short of just totally terrifying on the actual day when it happened. And add to that the fact that this guy was trying to call the police that day and tell them that apparently I had broken my son's leg in the back of my van, which I think is also very indicative of the fact that he felt guilty, very indicative of the fact that he knew that he was responsible, very indicative of the fact that he was trying to pass the blame again onto somebody else, me. Surprise, surprise. And I think very clearly if he, as I say, had not been partly responsible for causing this accident, he would not have been trying to tell the police that I had broken my son's leg in the back of my van, which is just like the most appalling, disgusting lie that I've ever heard in my life. I mean, on top of all the lies that were trotted out in the courtroom to try and cover up his murder attempt, I mean, it absolutely stinks, the whole thing of just deceit, lies, just perjury, and just disgusting fabricated nonsense. Which I think, really, as I say, needs urgently addressing. And the fact that there was just such a cataclysmic and catalogue of catastrophe following this perjury and from the court cases in the form of these terrible GBH to a minor and mutilations to myself is highly indicative and clear evidence of the truth about what happened, about the brick murder attempt and the efforts to cover it up. And quite clearly, if this issue does not get addressed, then it could happen again to somebody else. It inevitably will happen to somebody else. There will be another child that suffers GBH in the very near future. There will be somebody else that ends up badly mutilated, like myself, as a consequence of all this deceit, perjury and lies. And until somebody addresses it, then it's just simply going to carry on, isn't it? So I'm very sorry that it took so long for this day to come, but it was better late than never. And I look forward to hearing some response about this in the very near future. Thank you for your time.